Our project today is going to be replacing the clutch slave cylinder on a Mini Cooper or Cooper S from 2002 to 2006. What you're going to experience if this happens to you is the clutch pedal will typically fall to the floor, you'll have a loss of brake fluid, and there'll be a brake fluid puddle under your vehicle right about here underneath the car in your garage. So let's get in the shop and I'll show you how to do the job. So here we are under the driver's side of the vehicle. This is your transmission right here. This is your engine oil pan. And right up front here you see your clutch slave cylinder. Clutch slave cylinder is made out of plastic. Seems to be a pretty popular material nowadays for clutch slave cylinders. And here's the feed line that comes from the clutch master cylinder. Clutch master cylinder compresses the fluid down into the slave cylinder. It is supposed to compress the piston or push the piston outward, force it outward. It in turn moves this lever, which in turn inside the bell housing activates the clutch. Now the downside of a Mini Cooper slave cylinder when trying to bleed it is the feed line and the bleeder are very close together. So if you put this assembly together as you see it, try to bleed the clutch from this bleeder. What's going to happen is the fluid likes to go down the tube, totally bypass the cylinder, and go right out the bleeder. So you can bleed 2 or 3 quarts of oil or brake fluid right out of the system and find out that you still got air in the system. So later on when we remove this old unit, we're going to put a new unit on, and what we're going to basically have to do is compress this piston all the way down. So we eliminate the air pocket in here, and then bleeding the system will take the remaining small bubbles of air out of the system rather than leaving an air pocket in here. I've done this project before. It'll take you an hour and a half if you do it wrong. It'll take you just a few minutes if you do it right. Okay, here we are underneath the car, and you can see the slave cylinder's been leaking right through the boot. To remove the slave cylinder, what you're going to do is remove the lower 8mm holding bolt and the upper one right here. And what you're going to then do is disconnect the retaining clip that has the quick disconnect to the feed line coming from the clutch master cylinder. So here on the table we've got a new slave cylinder, and here's the tool that we kind of devised to compress that piston all the way to the back of the slave cylinder. It's basically a piece of 1/8 by 1 inch steel, and we drilled a couple of holes in it, and we put a little washer on here just to keep the piston centered up on it, and we're compressing that piston all the way down and letting the little bolts hold the whole project together like that with a compressed piston inside. This way, once the fluid enters the slave cylinder into the feed line opening right here, the fluid has no choice but to just fill this little cavity right here, and there is no air pocket trapped in here. So it'll be much easier to bleed. Once it's been bled, then all you have to do is release the 2 bolts, allow it to expand. It will draw more fluid in from the master cylinder, and then what it'll do is almost need no bleeding at all. The clutch should work fine when you get inside the car to push on it.